Are you searching for a foolproof way to add smooth curves and beautiful shapes to your quilts without the frustration? Well, you are in the right place. I'm Jen Wagner, a quilt pattern designer, instructor, and proud Benertex and Oliso ambassador. My quilt patterns have been enjoyed by thousands of quilters worldwide. I've had the honor of teaching at Quilt Market, QuiltCon, and Road to California, among other shows and for guilds and retreats. Today I'm sharing a technique that gives your quilts clean curves and hidden stitches. It's a unique twist on reverse applique that I call ghost stitch applique. In traditional applique, we take shapes like a petal or a leaf and stitch them on top of a background. But in reverse applique, we do it the opposite way, taking our background and stitching it on top of our shape. In this new method, we're going to combine both techniques using a little bit of freezer paper and some Elmer's glue. And I'm using this technique in my brand new pattern called Poppy Louise, and I can't wait to share it with you. So let's jump in. We are going to start by making the center of the blocks, and we do that by starting with a square. And in the pattern is this triangle template, and I've intentionally printed it in blue so it's a little easier to see. And this template is to cut off the corners so that our square becomes an octagon. And I like to make this easy by taking a ruler and taping my template to the bottom side of a ruler. Now I can line up my blue piece of paper perfectly, and then I can get my rotary cutter and I can just come in and simply trim off these corners. If I were using the vase fabric for this, like I did in the other blocks, well, all the blocks are the same, I just have different fabrics. I would have intentionally fussy cut out so that whatever I wanted in the middle was in the middle. Okay, now I've got all four corners cut off and now I have my octagon. And in the pattern are these templates, and these are to make the curves on the edge. And you can see that they fit perfectly on the octagon. So I have printed these on freezer paper. Freezer paper is paper on one side and plastic on the other side. And the great thing is that the plastic will melt when you iron it, just enough to stick to fabric. And so that way I can use my template over and over again. Now, you can buy freezer paper at the grocery store, but it's really floppy. So I actually like to use the heavy duty kind. I'm going to take my template and place it on the edge of my other fabric. And then I'm going to iron this in place. The store-bought freezer paper is very thin, so it irons really quickly. But with this heavy duty freezer paper, you do have to iron it just a moment longer, and you can see that it's stuck. If I don't like where it's at, I can always just peel it off and then iron it back down. So these work beautifully. Now I'm going to make one and show you how this looks. And I'm just going to roughly cut around the outside of this template. It doesn't have to be pretty. Great. Okay. Then I'm going to come in and I'm going to start snipping all the way around. Now that I have my tabs created, I could come around here and use a little best press and I could spray that, but it kind of gets all over. So I like to use an easy press pen and just come right here along the edge and put a little bit of this liquid here, and you can see it's soaking into the fabric. So it makes it a little easier to get it right along the edge. And I do want some kind of starch there to help create a nice sharp fold. And then I'm going to take my little mini iron and I'm going to start bending these back right up against the freezer paper. And this is why I like that sturdier template, because it doesn't bend on me, making it much easier to do this step. And I like to just start to guide the fabric over the freezer paper little bit by little bit. And as it starts to behave a little bit more, then I can put more pressure on it and really get those tabs to come and stay down. And my goal here is to get a nice smooth curve. So it is worth taking my time to really get those down and smooth. And then I'm going to check from the other side and make sure that I'm happy with it. Looks good. So now I'm going to let this cool for just a moment. Ooh. And then I'm going to peel my freezer paper off. Careful here on the edge not to pull my threads off the edge of my fabric. And I'm going to press this just one more time to get it really good and flat. We're going to take my square that's now an octagon, and look at how beautifully that curve fits right there on the edge. We're going to get my Buddy Elmer. I love to use Elmer as a basting glue. And the nice thing about Elmer is while he's wet, I can reposition, and he washes out of our fabrics, but he can be a little bit messy getting blobs of glue everywhere. So I put these little fine tips on my bottles, and it lets me put just a small bead right here on the edge, really controlled right where I want it. And you can see why I wanted that pressed really well. And then I'm going to flip this over, and we're going to stick this down right on the edge. Perfect. Okay. And then we can leave this to dry, but Elmer's will set with heat. And so I can just dry out that glue. I have no water in my iron. My iron is dry, and that helps that set beautifully. And you can see now it is stuck on there really good. See? Now, if I had ironed this and it was crooked, no big deal. I could peel it off and redo it, but this looks really good. Now we're going to come underneath and trim out this extra fabric from our octagon. And I'm just going to roughly trim this out. It doesn't have to be pretty. The great thing about this technique is that the freezer paper is making it look pretty, and so it's less work on me. Now I'm going to secretly stitch this so that there is no stitching on the top, but this fabric needs to bend a little bit underneath the foot of my sewing machine, and so I clip this to give it more room to move around the sewing machine. Okay, so now let's go over to the sewing machine. I'll show you how I sew this. I am using red thread to make it easier for you to see, but normally I would be using a coordinating thread. I've also put an open toe foot on my machine, which makes it easier for me to see where I'm going. I'm going to start with my fabrics both right side up, and then I'm going to peek underneath this curved fabric and expose the fold. I've got a little bit of glue in there, no big deal, just pull it open. And I am going to sew directly in the fold. Lift this top fabric enough so that I can see where I'm going. And I am going to stitch directly in the fold. Now I've gone in and I've marked the fold so it's easier for you to see. And you can absolutely do that when you're at home if the bright lights of your sewing machine are washing out the shadow. But I'm going to try and stitch directly on there, and I have bumped my stitch speed down because I don't want to go 90 miles an hour. And I'm also going to finish with my needle down, so as I need to, I can lift and adjust my fabrics. So I'll show you what this looks like. We're going to go ahead and start sewing here. And as I need to, I'm going to pause and lift and continue to get the part that I'm going to sew. So what's directly in front of my foot, nice and flat. And that's the only part that needs to lie flat. As I continue sewing, it's going to pull up behind. That's normal. And of course, it's misbehaving here in front, but that's fine because what's directly in front of my foot is nice and flat. Now, when I sew these, I'm going to sew all the way across, except on this very first one, because we are going to actually overlap these. And when I get to do curve number 8, the last curve, I'm actually going to pull this apart where I've glued it down just enough so that I can tuck that next piece underneath, the next curve underneath. So normally I would sew all the way, but on this very first one, I'm just going to sew, about halfway, and that's it. Now that I have sewn this first part of my first curve, I'm going to come and iron it down. And if I needed to, I could spritz this with a little bit of my starch to get it to lay flat. But this time it's laying flat really nicely. And then I'm going to continue doing the same thing. So I would make another curve out of my fabric and then place it over here and stitch it down. And what's so fun about this technique is that all the stitching is hiding underneath. Remember, I used red thread. It's there. but you don't see it from the front. And we're just going to continue overlapping and adding all the way around. Now that you know how to add all these beautiful curves to your blocks, we're going to use the same exact method to add the curves to this border. Thank you so much for being here today and watching this video. If you loved this technique and you want to get your hands on this pattern or any of the supplies that I used in this video, check out the links below. Happy quilting!